What's your stance on a PST? Hey, Pamela, thanks. I'm a bit confused about your comment and the Alberta Party position because they have said publicly that they are open to a sales tax. I believe the leader, Glenn Clark, has said that it is an idea well worth considering. And here's a little tip, Pamela. If you ever hear a politician saying they're open to a particular tax, they're for it. Thankfully, back in the mid 1990s, when I was head of the Taxpayers Federation, I successfully lobbied the Klein government to adopt something called the Taxpayer Protection Act, which requires a referendum before a sales tax can be introduced in Alberta. So I'm glad that we got that into law. I have no doubt that were it not for the Alberta Taxpayer Protection Act, that this NDP government would already have imposed a sales tax. In a sense, the carbon tax is almost a form of sales tax. It's a consumption tax of sorts, and it imposed on the consumption of CO2, which finds its way into virtually every aspect of the economy. I think they ought to have held a referendum on that. So I will stick by the Taxpayer Protection Act, the requirement of a referendum. Listen, I don't believe Alberta has a revenue problem. I think we have a spending problem. We're spending 20% more per person than British Columbia is to deliver the same services. So let's focus on getting our spending in order before we even think about additional taxes. I should point out that Greg Clark and the Alberta Party are very clearly in favor of carbon taxes. They just say they're opposed to the NDP carbon tax, but they want a different carbon tax. I don't care what kind of carbon tax you call it. It's bad for consumers, it's bad for our economy, and it doesn't help the environment in any measurable way. To quote the professor at the University of Alberta, Andrew Leach, who helped to design the NDP carbon tax, a tax like this will not, he said, reduce carbon emissions by as much as we would hope or expect, but will have the effect of displacing carbon-producing economic activity from Alberta to other jurisdictions that do not have a similar tax. And that's the problem that economists call carbon leakage. We have seen that with the withdrawal of some $34 billion of investment from the oil and gas sector by multinational companies in the past year, redeploying that capital to the oil and gas sector in other places around the world that don't have carbon taxes. So we can see this problem of carbon leakage, and that's one reason I think the Alberta Party is wrong to support a carbon tax. All right, and by the way, let me just add, I've never wavered on that. Some other candidates in the UCP leadership race have been, shall we say, a little less consistent when it comes to opposition to a carbon tax.